today we are debating whether or not there is something to alien abductions, and we are starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for another epic debate, or I should say discussion today, as I think this is going to be a really interesting one, folks. Want to let you know, if it's your first time here to Modern Day Debate, I'm your host, James, and our goal, our vision here is to basically give everybody from every walk of life an equal shot to make their case on a level playing field. So we're really excited to have two distinguished guests here today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Want to let you know a couple of housekeeping things for the channel. First, then we'll talk about the format and then introduce our guests. First is, if you have not heard, we are very excited. Modern Day Debate has invaded the podcast world. So if you can't find us on your favorite podcast app, just let us know. We'll work hard to get on there for you. Also, very excited, if you love debate, folks, and if this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we have many more debates to come we're very excited about. For example, the resurrection debate this Friday between Matt Dillahunty and Dr. Jonathan McClatchy. So that should be a lot of fun, folks. And with that, I want to start talking about the details for today's discussion. So what we're going to have is a pretty flexible 5 to 10 minute opening statement from each side. And we'll start with Dr. Ross, and then we'll kick it over to TJump. And also, after that, we're going to have mostly open conversation followed by Q&A. So if you happen to have a question for the question and answer session, just shoot it into the old live chat. And if you tag me with @ModernDayDebate, it makes it easier for me to get every single question in that list. Also, Super Chat is an option, which you could either ask a question or make a comment, to which of course the guest would get a chance to respond to, and it'll push your question or comment to the top of the list for the Q&A. We also ask, as always, as you be your regular friendly selves. We appreciate that, as we really do appreciate these guests. This is a quality discussion. I'm really excited for this one, you guys. But they're doing it just because they love to do this. And so we really do want to show them our appreciation. And with that, we're going to get into the introductions. TJump is no stranger to the channel, pictured on the right. Tom has thousands of followers on his YouTube channel, which regularly hosts debates between scholars from all walks of life as well. So, want to remind you that both TJump and Dr. Hugh Ross are linked in the description, folks. So if you want to hear more, what are you waiting for? What better time to click on their links down below to get to learn more about them and their arguments. And so also want to let you know, very excited, as with Dr. Hugh Ross, let me show you this, guys. I'm so excited because this is a book I had read about 10 years ago, and Dr. Ross was actually one of the co-authors on this. And so he and some colleagues had written this book on this topic of the debate today. We highly encourage you to check it out. It's a really good read, really fun, and very excited to give you this formal introduction for Dr. Ross, as well as an astronomer and best-selling author. Hugh Ross travels the globe speaking on the compatibility of advancing scientific discoveries with the timeless truths of Christianity. His organization, Reasons to Believe, is dedicated to demonstrating via a variety of resources and events that science and biblical faith are allies, not enemies. So this is going to be a really fun one, folks. We are going to kick it into this actual discussion or debate today, with Hugh Ross taking the lead on his opening statement. Thanks again, Dr. Ross, for being with us. The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. And as you mentioned, I'm one of the 3 authors on this book, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, subtitle, A Rational Christian Look at UFOs and Extraterrestrials. People can get a free chapter of that book at reasons.org/Ross. And that book will give you in detail my position. I'm just going to be brief here. As an astronomer, I believe that it's not possible for physical aliens like us to engage in interstellar space travel. In fact, my latest studies indicate that even interplanetary space travel is out of the question. So as far as little green men like us, no, I don't think that's an option. But I've been studying UFOs since I was 16 years of age. Every university where I served, they made me the fellow that had to deal with all the people claiming to have had encounters with UFOs. And I can tell you that about 99% what people reported to me as UFOs, either as a natural explanation, it's a human phenomena, typically some military secret spacecraft kind of event, or it's a hoax. But there's a 1% residual. And what's interesting about the 1% residual is that we actually have evidence that it generates real effects, where you actually go to the crash sites and see the effects, but there's no debris, there's no artifacts. When they go through the atmosphere, they violate the laws of physics, which indicates we're dealing with something, albeit real, is not physical. And so I take the same position as a half dozen other PhD level physicists who have dedicated more than 10 years to studying the database. Namely, we're dealing with something that is interdimensional. We're dealing with phenomena that's coming to us from dimensions beyond the physical dimensions and the laws of physics of the universe. Now, I had Carl Sagan as a professor when I was at the University of Toronto briefly, and he basically dismissed UFOs, but that's because he had the worldview. There's no such thing as non-physical reality. And, as a Christian, I believe that God is created both in the physical realm and the non physical realm. So I'm willing to entertain the possibility of non physical reality. And what we describe in this book is a correlation between the level of occult involvement and people who are experiencing encounters with UFOs, particularly the close encounters. And again, if anybody wants to look at that, uh, you know, we have the physicist Alan Hynek, who basically developed these categories of the kinds of encounters. But it's been my experience that the level of these, what I would call the real UFOs, not the 99%, is that the level of incidence is extremely low in the 48 states, quite a bit higher in Hawaii and Alaska, and very much higher when you go to certain regions of France, if you go to equatorial Brazil, or if you look at what was going on in the Soviet Union before the collapse of the communist government. I've been back to Russia since, and the level of these experiences has literally plummeted, but it's plummeted in direct proportion to people walking away from the occult. So, that in a nutshell is where I'm coming from. I'm not an expert in abductions. My co author, Ken Samples, he's a cult expert, and so he wrote the chapters on alien abductions. But I have talked to people who claim to have been abducted. And again, I take a skeptical approach. The vast majority of people have come to me claiming to have been abducted by UFOs. They really haven't been abducted. They're dealing with some kind of psychological thing, something that they really desire. But again, I find a small residual that I think has legitimacy. And basically, talk about in this book is how we can put these kinds of ideas to a rigorous scientific test. It's the only book I know on UFOs that takes that kind of scientific approach.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Dr. Ross. We will kick it over to Tom for his brief opening as well, and then we'll go right into that open conversation. Tom, thanks for being back, and the floor is all yours.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep it pretty brief too. My understanding is I pretty much agree with you that 99% of all the claims of UFO abductions have been shown to be just natural phenomenon, and there is definitely like a 1% that hasn't. But that's just like in anything in science, there's always 1% of something that can't be explained in every field. I don't think that gives us license to imply that it's a supernatural thing in any way, unless there is like a scientific way to demonstrate it. So I'm really interested to hear what this scientific methodology you're proposing is to demonstrate the supernatural cause of UFOs. That'll be really interesting.
You bet. With that, we'll kick it right into open conversation. Thanks, gentlemen.
Well, first thing I wanted to note was you said you debated with Carl Sagan earlier.
No, I had him as a professor at the University of Toronto, and he talked about extraterrestrials. I mean, as you're probably aware, he was a real fan of the idea that there
Yeah,
were extraterrestrial beings like us.
he
And I
wrote
was
a
a
book about
graduate
it.
student, basically saying, I don't think so. Uh, and then he talked briefly about UFOs and said, you know, since there's no such thing as non-physical reality, they can't be real. And if I agreed with his worldview, I would agree with him. that if indeed there's no such thing as non-physical reality, then there can't be any truth to the UFO phenomena.
Well, I mean, I don't think his conclusion was based off of that as a presupposition. I think it's a conclusion based off the evidence. We have no evidence of the supernatural. Therefore, to suppose that something is supernatural would be an unreasonable conclusion. So I don't think it was because of his worldview that he rejected it. I think it was because of the evidence that he rejected it. I don't think there is any evidence that the supernatural. Could you tell me a little bit about your scientific proposal to demonstrate the UFOs are supernatural in some way?
Well, Carl never really looked at the evidence. People like Alan Hynek did. People like Jacques Vallée have. Excuse me, I have a little bit of asthma I'm dealing with. But what I document in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men is every PhD level physicist has devoted a minimum of 10 years to studying the UFO phenomena, has come to the conclusion we're dealing with something that's real, but we're dealing with something that violates the laws of physics, which is why you got people like Jacques Vallée saying we're dealing with something interdimensional. I could broaden that to say maybe we're dealing with something transdimensional. But what all these physicists are agreeing on, we're dealing with a phenomena that doesn't fit within the physical constraints of our universe. And basically the other thing they all agree on, they all agree that what we see in this residual, the 1%, is a one-to-one correspondence with what we see in the occult and witchcraft. And I'm the only one of these authors that is a Christian. The rest of them are agnostics or atheists. And they say, well, whatever is behind the occult and witchcraft is also behind these residual UFO phenomena, mainly because they document that 0% of it is beneficial. It's 100% deleterious. People have actually gotten injured and died from these phenomena. And in terms of the physical evidence that they cite, it's basically those 2,000 plus incidences where you have multiple observers watching the UFO go through the atmosphere, where they can do triangulation, determine the velocity. And one reason why they say we're dealing with something outside of the physics of the universe, when you track the velocity, it's 18 to 25,000 miles per hour, and yet there's no sonic boom and there's no heat friction as this so-called object goes through the atmosphere. And then when you have witnesses where they see it crashing into the earth, you go to the impact site, and there's many places where you can see a crater, as much as a foot deep crater. If there's snow, the snow is melted. If there's vegetation, they can document radiation damage to the vegetation. And yet in 100% of those cases, there's no debris, there's no artifacts. If it was a spaceship crashing into the earth, there would be debris, there would be artifacts. But 100%, there's nothing there to show physical evidence of this event. But mainly what I've done with my co-authors, I got Mark Clark. He's a national security expert. And basically he wrote the chapters on, is our government covering up evidence? I mean, that's recently come in the news that our government indeed is covering it up. And as someone who has spent 2 decades in national security, he basically says we're overestimating the capacity of our US security system. It's not that good. There's no way that they could cover up actual physical evidence. And then Ken Samples, he basically works with me to make the point that what's really interesting, if you look at Alan Hynek's classification system, the only individuals that have the close encounters where they're within 500 feet of the event, where they're actually claiming to get communications through automatic writing, or where they're injured by the event, that it only happens to people that are deeply involved in the occult. And where I close the book off is by saying those individuals that shut down their occult activity, the UFO phenomena goes away 100% of the time. If they divorce themselves, cut themselves off from their occult activities, no more UFO incidences. And the reverse is also true. If they open themselves up to the occult in a significant way, they will have these experiences. And I saw that personally when I was speaking to scientists in the Soviet Union in the 1980s and early 1990s. I mean, that was a time when the Soviet Union was giving generous grants to universities, to physics departments to study occult physics, hoping to develop weaponry they could use against the West. And consequently, many of these professors had these close encounters. But now that they've stopped funding occult research, that has disappeared. And so the number of people in Russia who claim to have UFO encounters has plummeted, but it's in direct proportion to the plummeting of their involvement in the occult. So that's kind of the bottom line. And so I kind of end the book by saying, this is happening to you. This is how you can get out. Because basically we spend a lot of the book pointing out this is not something you want to pursue. It has 100% of the time, you're going to have very unpleasant consequences. The best you're going to come away with is recurring, terrifying nightmares.
Okay, I've got a few questions about that. The first would be the breaking the laws of physics. Like, I don't think anything you described technically breaks the laws of physics. For example, we can get shadows and beams of light that can go faster than 25,000 kilometers per second and have no airwaves because it's light. It doesn't have any mass. So we can just have certain kinds of visual effects where like light can bend due to hot air or cold air, and it can cause things to appear to see like they're moving at 25,000 kilometers per second, and yet they're just not. It's just the light doing it. So that doesn't seem like it would break the laws of physics unless you assume there was actually a physical thing there, which I don't
Right.
think.
No, I would agree with that.
And other places like the debris you mentioned, also that would also not necessarily break the laws of physics, because essentially you could have a asteroid or something that would be falling through the atmosphere at a tremendous speed, and it would be breaking apart and dissolving because of the pressure, and it would essentially break apart to the point where it's just a tiny rock at the point where it hit the ground, but it would still create enough of an impact to leave some resulting effect with no debris. So that also I don't think would break any laws of
Well,
physics.
that's where I would disagree because, I mean, um, as an astronomer, if you've got some kind of asteroid or comet striking the Earth, you will find something. You're going to get isotope evidence. You're going to find tiny pieces of it. I mean, a good example of that is the Behringer crater in Arizona. You know, blew out a crater almost a mile across, yet the biggest piece we have is only a couple of feet across, and most of them are just tiny pebbles. But the best evidence we have is you get an iridium isotope signature that tells you, or causing the vegetation to be damaged the way it is. It's something non-physical.
Well, to me, it seems like it could perfectly well be physical if it was just a smaller asteroid. Like the Behringer crater was created by a big asteroid, so obviously it broke up into lots of pieces, and there's lots of residual stuff we could measure. But if it was a small asteroid, it would be very hard to measure any of that. If it
No,
broke off,
even a small one, you're going to find something. I mean, if you've got some kind of damage effect on the Earth, you're going to find something. I mean, that's what happens every time people see a bolide coming through the atmosphere and people realize it actually hit the Earth. They send a team there and they always find evidence, even with the smallest ones.
well, like for example, it's the ones in Russia, which essentially just evaporated in the atmosphere and just used a sound wave, which broke lots of windows and trees. That left an impact, but there was no crater or anything. So that created an impact on Earth where we didn't find any parts to it at all necessarily.
Oh, but you do find isotope evidence.
Where because it didn't hit the ground.
It didn't hit the ground, but I mean, you're going to have stuff that's falling down at the molecular level. And if you search that ground area, you will see the isotope signatures that tells you it was this kind of comet or this kind of asteroid. And that's what they did with these events in Russia. They were actually able to determine what kind of object had that shock effect in the atmosphere because of the isotopes they were able to analyze. And if you
Uh,
got isotopes, that tells you it's something physical.
well, I don't think it'd be true that necessarily anything physical would produce those isotopes. So I don't think that would necessarily be the case.
Well, I mean, if you've got something coming through the atmosphere, it impacts the atmosphere. You're going to get, again, heat friction. You're going to get a sonic boom. And yeah, you might get this shock wave that knocks on all these trees, but you're going to get a follow from it. That's basically what they do. They may not have any pebbles from the event, but they will be able to see, you know, the isotopes of the fallout that tells them what was really going on. So you don't actually have to find chunks and pieces of the object to determine what kind of object or even what size. I mean, that's what's interesting. By the amount of isotope uh, abundance they see there, they can determine how big it was and you know exactly what happened to it.
So what do you mean by isotopes? 'Cause I suppose isotope is just like two different forms of matter, right? So when you say they measure the isotopes, what are they measuring?
What they're measuring is the difference. I mean, iridium is one of the ones they look at, especially because that's one of the easiest ones to look at, where they basically say, okay, do we see a different iridium isotope ratio than we do for stuff that we know is strictly terrestrial? So that's how they determine not only whether it was an asteroid or a comet, but they can actually determine what kind of asteroid struck, because they're very interested, for example, in finding these metal asteroids, and they'll have a slightly different signature. And iridium is just one. I mean, there's several things we can look at. They also look, for example, at the what they call the highly Siderfield elements, because if you got one of these metal asteroids striking the Earth, it's going to have a high abundance of platinum and gold and osmium. So they'll look for that.
But isn't it true that some asteroids would not leave a significant difference in isotopes? It's not necessarily the
Well,
case that any of them would all necessarily do this.
the only exception would be if you, for example, had a meteorite strike the Earth somewhere else, eject Earth material, and then Earth material fell back to the Earth. In that case, you would get the isotope signature of Earth material. But I don't even know if that's ever been done, because obviously the vast majority are not going to fit into that category. What is interesting is they can actually determine whether a meteorite came from the moon or from the Mars or from the asteroid belt or came from the Kuiper belt. Again, the isotopes tell them the origin of the object or the debris that they found or the molecular evidence that they have there.
So it doesn't necessarily break the laws of physics. It's just not within the known ones yet. But that doesn't seem like it violates the laws of physics in any way.
Well, it violates the known laws of physics. In other words, we're dealing with something that violates the law of gravity, the law of electromagnetism. Uh, so thermodynamics is being violated.
Well, I mean, if it like the example you gave of something hitting the Earth and it being ejected from Earth, I mean, that doesn't violate any of those and it doesn't leave an isotope mark. So it's definitely possible that something can do this without violating the laws of physics. Um, so it doesn't. It seems like the cases you're listing are things we just haven't been able to explain yet, which is happens all the time in science. But I don't think it's any real demonstrable evidence of it literally breaking the laws of physics. I think that would be really cool if it did, but it's just
Well, I
an
think
unknown
it
event.
actually does in the sense that, to try to claim that these 2,000 plus incidences are all fallback of the results of collision events elsewhere that brought back Earth material. I mean, the statistical probability of happening that is basically zero. I mean,
2000 plus events. You mean like what are these 2000 events? Like crop circle kind of events?
no. I mean, if you're talking about the residual UFO database, it's upwards around 100 million. But if you're talking about cases where you got observers that are actually able to see the thing go through the atmosphere, where they can determine where it hit the ground, where they go to the site and they can actually see that there's a crater there, damaged vegetation, melted snow, those kinds of things where you got substantial observations and physical evidence. That database is a little bit beyond 2,000 separate incidents.
And
So it's
all of
not a
these
small database.
and all these have been confirmed scientifically. There's been scientists that have gone out there, measured the isotopes, and confirmed that these don't have any, and then have verified that these are true.
Well, there have been a number of physicists, like Jacques Vallée and John Keel and Alan Hynek, who basically devoted their lives to saying, I'm skeptical. Let's actually check out the evidence. And they were shocked just how much evidence there really was. And basically, that was their conclusion. We're not dealing with something we can sweep under the carpet. There's just way too much evidence. And that's one reason why we had Jimmy Carter, when he was elected president, one of his campaign promises was, if I'm elected, I'm going to get to the bottom of this UFO phenomenon. And so the first thing he did, one of the first things he did when he became president, he contacted NASA and said, I want you to study this. NASA gave him a very interesting response. If you can provide physical, tangible evidence with real artifacts, we'll investigate it. But if you can't, we won't. And that's what stopped it, because in the UFO database, there are no artifacts. There is no debris that you can, and that's one reason why I say we're dealing with something that's non-physical. If it was physical, there would be debris, there would be artifacts. So I'm with NASA. NASA's mission is to study the physical. And since this is outside that realm, they said, get somebody else to look at it. We're not doing it.
So, for example, but couldn't it be caused by, for example, an illusion or a delusion or just a refraction of light in the sky, which they saw, and they calculated the impact crater, and the impact crater was there, but it wasn't caused by any, so it was just caused by something on Earth. And it happened to be the case that they saw a delusion that made it look like this impact crater, and they assumed it was created by their delusion.
Well, I agree with you that the vast majority of what people report as UFOs falls in that category. After all, we're looking at 100 million separate reports. So, and as I told you at the very beginning, in my own investigations, 99% fall into that category. But to claim that this crater was made by something physical and terrestrial within the laws of physics, we would expect to find debris. We would expect to find artifacts. We'd expect to hear a sonic boom. There'd be heat friction, and we see none of that.
Well, just assume it wasn't a meteorite. Assume it was something that started on Earth, like a guy who just put some TNT there and blew it up or something. Like there could be lots of different human-based ways to create craters that don't involve anything in space. So someone saw an illusion that they thought something was coming from space, and some guy was just plowing his field and hit a gas line or something, and that caused the crater. Like, aren't those natural things?
Well,
Definitely
they are,
possibilities.
but when those kinds of explosions take place, you've got tangible evidence at the site. I mean, that's the distinction. There's no evidence of TNT residue. All you see is this crater. You see melted snow. You see damaged vegetation, but that's it. And that's what's caused people like Jacques Vallée to say, we're not dealing with something physical here. We're not dealing with because his first response was, it's like the crop circles. We're dealing with hoaxes that people are pulling off. But he says this doesn't fall in that category.
Are you saying they tested for every possible naturalistic explanation that we know of on Earth in every single one of these cases?
Not in every single one of the cases. I mean, in each case, they go there and they say, we can't find any debris. We've gone to the site. We've scoured the place. There's nothing there except for the fact that we got a crater. We got melted snow. We got damaged vegetation. And moreover, when they look at the damaged vegetation, they see that it has what several physicists have said. We see the signature of radiation damage, but we don't see any isotopes that tell us whether it's done by cosmic rays. It looks like radiation damage, but it looks like radiation damage that's unlike any radiation effect we've ever observed. And again, that's one reason I conclude we're dealing with something outside of the laws of physics, because the fact that we can't identify the kind of radiation that brought about this damage of the vegetation, I think is quite interesting.
So you say it's outside of the laws of physics, but obviously it's inside of some of the laws of physics, having a physical interaction with things like radiation. So it's being very selective with the laws of physics it's going outside of. So wouldn't it be reasonable to conclude that maybe it is actually just an unknown natural thing in the law of physics that we just don't know about yet, since it does seem to be in many of the laws of physics, just not a few of them?
Well, I come from a Christian worldview perspective, and in that perspective, we have God creating two different species of intelligent beings that are physical like us and constrained by the laws of physics, where we can't leave the physics of this universe. But the Bible also says that God created angels and says that they live in a completely different dimensional realm than we do. But unlike us, they have the power to come into our realm and leave our realm. We can't enter their realm, but they can enter ours. And so that's one reason why we brought the book out, because coming from a Christian worldview perspective, I think we can go a little bit further than the other books written by physicists, where they just say, we see a correspondence with the occult, we see a correspondence, a one-to-one correspondence with witchcraft, but that's outside of our area, and so they stop there. Or you got people like Jacques Vallée saying, this is not our physics, it's some other kind of physics. It's physics that points to the fact that there must be an interdimensional realm. And so that's been, he's devoted 6 decades to this, basically saying we got an overwhelming case that we are dealing with something that's affecting us from other dimensions.
There's many scientists who have interesting theories on their own that are not taken seriously by the consensus because there isn't enough supporting evidence, even though the individual scientists may think that it's very well supported. So I definitely don't want to discredit any of his work and just say he's a crackpot or anything. I think he may be perfectly reasonable to believe what he has found as evidence, but it hasn't done much to convince the rest of the scientists. Because as far as I can tell, we have an unknown phenomenon we can't explain. And you proposed a hypothesis that it's demons of some kind, non-physical things. And I'm proposing an alternative hypothesis, just an undiscovered physical force of some kind. Why would we prefer what would indicate the supernatural explanation?
To basically deal with these kinds of questions. And so it's been publishing articles for, 3 decades now, but basically making the point that scientists who actually do engage with us, we really do see a consensus. As you're probably aware, most scientists say, hey, I'm only going to deal with physics. If it's outside of that, I'm not interested. But the Journal of Scientific Exploration basically was founded, okay, we're scientists. Let's actually look at these kinds of possibilities and just see what we come up with. And what's interesting there is you see that Jacques Vallée is in the mainstream. He's not outside the mainstream. And if you look at people like Alan Hynek and Jacques Vallée, they have very high credibility. I mean, that's one thing our US government noted. We can't say this is just crackpot stuff, because look at all these physicists that have such high integrity and credibility, and all of them are saying that this is something outside of our physical realm. But again, the military is basically saying, if it's outside our physical realm, we're not going to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree it's outside of the known physics for sure. But when you mention that the people who work in the field see positive results, well, that's true of every pseudoscience too. Like people who devote their lives to homeopathy usually tend to believe homeopathy, or people who devote their lives to Christianity or Judaism or Islam or the archaeology and Hinduism, they always seem to find positive results for their personal belief system, regardless of whether or not it's true. If you invest your life into a worldview or an ideology, you tend to find positive results for that ideology. And which is why we require that peer-reviewed consensus process to filter out those kinds of personal biases. So I can totally understand why people who devote so much effort and time would find positive results, just as a part of human psychology. But the fact that they can't produce like an artifact or something that would actually be an indication of the alien hypothesis, then it just seems to be, here's an unknown event we can't explain, and I'm going to come up with an explanation for it. And anybody can do that. Anybody can just say, I'm going to come up with a different explanation for it than yours. And now we have two equally, it seems like they're on equal footing, alternate explanations. And we want to see, well, which one of these isn't imaginary? Which one is real? And
right.
The scientific community says, if you want to do that, you got to make like testable predictions. Give me some kind of actual real evidence to support this, not just the fact that you come up with an explanation, because anybody can come up with an explanation. And so what reason do we have to support this explanation that you've come up with as opposed to just anything else we can come up with?
Well, that's why this journal was founded, basically saying, okay, it's something outside of understood physics. We shouldn't just let it drop there. We need to pursue this and actually figure, okay, what kind of cause that we don't yet understand can explain this phenomena? And that's where you see this back and forth peer review going on in this journal. I mean, I'll be honest with you, they're proposing dozens of different explanations for this phenomena. But what I like about the journal, they're actually pursuing this scientific approach. Okay, these are different speculations that people are raising based on the database, which one actually is comprehensive in explaining the phenomena we're observing. And this is where people like Alan Hynek and Jacques Vallée are saying, well, of all these different explanations that people have popped up, I mean, they come up with things as strange as maybe we're seeing something at the quantum level and an arena where there's different laws of physics. There's lots of papers in that journal basically saying we think this is attributed to as yet undiscovered laws of physics. And some have even proposed maybe we're overlooking an anti-law of thermodynamics, what they've called the fourth law of thermodynamics, where there's some strange phenomena going on where thermodynamics goes in the opposite direction.
Wait, aren't
Uh,
there already 4 laws? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4?
well, I'll call it a fifth law then. There's three laws of thermodynamics that you'll see in textbooks.
Wasn't there? I'm pretty sure there's a 0th law of thermodynamics too. I saw that in a textbook. But
Yeah, a zero, first, second, and third. So if you
yeah.
want to squeeze a fourth out of that. But when they
But
talk about the fourth law in the scientific literature, they're really referring to something where entropy goes backwards. So
so,
instead
but
of things decaying, they improve.
yeah. So I definitely understand the perspective that people are arguing for their preferred hypothesis. That's totally fine. I mean, I can find climate scientists who deny climate change, and they're arguing for their preferred hypothesis, saying the evidence indicates that. But what actually is there that can actually indicate this? What evidence do they say makes that hypothesis more plausible? Just the fact that they read the journals or publish in the journals or argue for it doesn't give me anything to work with. It's just this is what they're saying, but why are they saying it? What evidence do we have to support that conclusion?
Well, the evidence is what I've talked about already. The fact that we got these crash sites, we got these multiple observers. It's not a small database, it's a big database. And where these physicists, I think, have really developed a consensus. It's really interesting that these kind of close encounters are only experienced by people that are deeply involved in the occult. And when they leave the occult, the experiences go away. And they enter the occult, they come. And also explains why we see so much more of this in certain nations and others. I mean, I've spoken on this throughout the US, and I encounter people like you all the time who are highly skeptical. But when I spoke to physicists in Russia in the late 1980s and early 1990s, it was exactly the opposite. They said, we're experiencing this all the time. We know it's real. And, and once they got out of their research on occult physics, suddenly these experiences went away. And I actually saw this when I was on the faculty of Caltech. There were a couple of physicists there who said, hey, the Russians are doing this. Let's do this as well. And they regretted it because of the effects. And then there's the astronomer, Peter Sturrock. He was one of the founders of this journal of scientific exploration. He surveyed astronomers all over the world because, what they found in the database is that UFOs are most frequently experienced at 3 a.m. in the morning on lonely country roads. And Peter made the observation, well, that's where we astronomers hang out. That's when we're outside making observations, and all of our telescopes are by lonely country roads. So he surveyed all the astronomers and was shocked by how many of them had claimed that they had these encounters. I saw that myself when I was at the University of Toronto, is there were two astronomers, every time they went on the telescope, they had an encounter with a UFO. And there are a couple of us who were basically logging 1,500 hours on the telescope per year, going on for 5, 6, 7 years. None of us saw a thing. Those two astronomers, they were getting maybe 2 to 3 hours of observing time a year. Every time they went on the telescope, they had one of these encounters. However, as I got to know those astronomers, both of them were deep into the occult. So that to me explained why those of us who are logging 1,500 to 2,000 hours a year were seeing nothing, and they were seeing them all the time.
Well,
And
that seems to be pretty well explained by psychology, is that if you have people who have more gullible personalities or are into more superstitious kind of beliefs, then they will most likely have more superstitious kind of interactions with what they believe in. So, for example, as a Christian, you have interactions with God when you pray and you talk to him and you see him act in your life. And then if you become an atheist, well, all those things kind of stop. It's not because necessarily because God isn't there anymore. It's just because your understanding, your worldview has changed, that you don't see those events as having some kind of connection to the thing you're connecting them to anymore. So the fact that people who are into the occult would be more prone to seeing UFO experiences seems very reasonable from a psychological standpoint. Just like if you're a Hindu, you're going to have more interactions with Brahma. It makes sense from a psychological standpoint. So I
Well,
don't.
that's what interested Peter Sturrock. He says, I can understand this with people who don't have a strong physics background, but these are people who are tenured at universities, and they're not gullible. They're very skeptical in their way they live their lives, and so that's what got his attention. Is that it's not just the kooks out there in the fringe. These are people that are psychologically well balanced. They're not gullible. They're very thorough in their research, and yet they're having these kinds of experiences. And so he's published extensively on this. And again, I can back up what he said. I mean, I didn't talk to the astronomers he did, but I did talk to those in places like France and the Soviet Union, and again saw this correlation. And I think what persuades me is when you leave the occult, these experiences go away. If you enter the occult, they come. If you go in there, they go away. And from a Christian worldview perspective, the occult is driven by these angelic beings that are in rebellion against God. That's the other thing you notice, is that when people get these automatic writings from these beings, is that what you see there is that it's 100% deceptive. I mean, I find it interesting that there's a 4,000-page book, the Orontia book, that was communicated to humans through these UFO beings. A third of that book is denying the deity of Jesus Christ. Why would these be so focused on that? But again, that's what John Keel was pointing out, is that hey, there does seem to be this one-to-one correspondence, which you see in demonology and the occult.
I mean, I'd say that the same one-to-one correspondence exists between sightings of Jesus and Christianity for the most part too. But that's not, I wouldn't say that's evidence of Christianity. I just say that's evidence of people who believe it want to see it, and so they see what they want to see. Just like the sightings of Santa Claus are usually one-to-one with children because they believe Santa Claus exists. You mentioned that the experts weren't gullible. I definitely don't agree with that, because there are cases like Banachek and James Randi, who
I understand, yeah.
they do the experiments, they do the magic thing to try and show, in the case of scientists, to trick the scientists, to show that the scientists are gullible and they don't understand what's going on, because there are a few famous musicians who were shown to not be real or legitimate, who did the same thing, who fooled the scientists into believing this. So experts are definitely gullible for sure, and that's why we require more of the consensus, the kind of future testable predictions thing. But you mentioned, when I asked for evidence, you listed the phenomenon, like people see a thing in the sky that seems to not cohere the laws of physics, and then we see a crater in the ground. Those are both experienced phenomenon, but you can't use those as an explanation. Those are just the things we see. You have to say, well, why would this be better explained by the supernatural as opposed to an undiscovered law? And trying to use like a negative argument, saying, well, the laws can't do X, Y, and Z, that doesn't really work, because we don't really know what the unknown laws can or can't do. You would need to make some kind of testable prediction. And the occult thing you mentioned, of just saying that people leaving the occult will stop seeing UFOs. Well, I can make the same prediction about any religion. If people leave the religion, they'll stop seeing visions of their deity. That doesn't mean it's necessarily evidence of any of those particular religious beliefs, in the same way it wouldn't be evidence that the occult and demonology are connected in the same way. It's just human psychology. If you believe a certain thing, then you're going to attribute interactions with the world to that thing. So do you have any other kinds of like testable predictions you could make that could indicate your explanation as opposed to just any of the unknown natural things?
Well, I think what impressed the physicists who devoted a decade plus to studying this phenomena is that there's a one-to-one correspondence. You don't see exceptions. They were anticipating, okay, if this is just people having delusional phenomena, then we're going to see a dispersion. But there is no dispersion. They're all reporting the same thing. And and then the idea that it's some undiscovered law of physics, now that is testable, in the sense that, for example, people who have speculated there's a fourth law of thermodynamics, where entropy goes the opposite way. Well, if that were really true, it actually rules out the possibility of physical life anywhere in the universe. So the fact that we're here actually proves there is no fourth law of thermodynamics. And there's other ways. I mean, that's what people have done in this journal of scientific exploration, is basically saying we're going to speculate new laws of physics that haven't been discovered. What properties are you predicting? And can we test those properties? And so that's one thing that's come out of that journal, is pursuing a thing where you got anti-gravity or anti-electromagnetism or anti-thermodynamics. That doesn't work, because if that were going on anywhere in the universe, would rule out the possibility of physical life everywhere in the universe.
Well,
Because, I
that,
mean, they've actually speculated maybe we're living in an exotic site in the universe, but the homogeneity and the uniformity of the universe is a requirement for life to exist anywhere in the universe. So these are the kinds of papers that are published in this journal. So I think they're really taking this seriously, saying, okay, if we're going to speculate something other than the occult and demonology, then we have to come up with scientific evidence for it. And that's where they're basically saying, that's where we're running into brick walls. And that's where they fall back and saying, no, it really does look like there's this one-to-one correspondence.
well, you need evidence for both. If you say it's supernatural or if you say it's an undiscovered law of nature, you need evidence for both. And the fact that you've ruled out some particular undiscovered law hypotheses doesn't at all rule out the undiscovered natural, because there's infinitely many potentially undiscovered laws that could exist. So just ruling out a few of them doesn't in any way rule out undiscovered natural processes one bit. But I do agree that if you do propose an undiscovered natural process, you need to provide evidence for it. Just like if you propose a supernatural thing, you need to provide evidence for it. And so
Right,
far,
right.
the only evidence I've seen you present is just the description of the phenomenon itself, which works for any explanation. Any explanation is going to be describing that phenomenon, and the connection between the occult and this experience, which I also had a question about that, but it seems like, again, that would be purely explainable by psychological phenomenon. You're never going to see people in a country who's never heard of some religion have experiences of that religion, because it's going to be specifically one-to-one to their belief system. So the fact that it's one-to-one is usually evidence it's not the case, not evidence it is the case. And most of the UFO sightings I've heard of don't have any connection to the occult at all. Like, many pilots see UFO sightings all the time. It's a common phenomenon, but most of those I would probably put into the explainable by natural phenomenon category.
Yeah, I
So,
would too.
so when you're talking about the one-to-one correlation, is this just a specific subset of those events that you're talking about have a one-to-one correlation?
Yes, this is where Alan Hynek came up with his encounters of the close kind, you know, first, second, third, fourth, etc. And basically said, hey, when you get into these really close encounters, this is where you see that correlation. But if it's a pilot in an airplane where he's seeing something that looks like it's 4 or 5 miles away, then you don't have the data to really determine what's going on. And most of those things have been explained as natural phenomena. I mean, one thing I've noticed is that the human eye takes time to adapt to different levels of illumination. So I've learned to ask the question, okay, when you saw this UFO, how many minutes transpired between the time you left your lit home and went outside to see the phenomena? If it's less than 20 minutes, I know that that's something that can happen in the human eye where you see flashes of light. It takes 20 minutes to fully dark adapt. So, I mean, that's why, I mean, most of the people who've written on this say they can rule out 95%. As an astronomer, I've been able to rule out 99% because I've learned to ask these kinds of questions where I can quickly discern, okay, this is this kind of phenomena that's causing it. But I think that thing that impresses me is when you travel around the world and talk to people, it's those parts of the world where you got a significant fraction of the population deep into the occult, believing in demonology and practicing demonology, where this phenomenon explodes to such a degree that everybody believes in it. The skeptics are in places like here in the US, where the phenomena is just so low that people say it's not real, it doesn't happen. And that's why, Peter Sturrock actually began to interview these astronomers and discovered it's the astronomers who've never had any contact with the occult that basically say this is just fiction. It doesn't happen. But those who really have been in it, they say, oh no, we're utterly convinced it's real. And when I say one to one, the fact that you're getting the same story, I mean, this is what Jacques Vallée was pointing out. We don't see outliers. We don't see anomalies. We see this consistent uh, account of what they're experiencing. Now, to be true to Jacques Vallée and Alan Hynek, they were agreeing that there's a variety of phenomena that can explain it, but that the range of phenomena must be occurring within something that is interdimensional. And so they said, if we're going to speculate interdimensionality, that opens up quite a range of possibilities. And so I'm not trying to put words in their mouth saying they've nailed down one particular phenomena. Most physicists have, but people like Jacques Vallée said, I do see this one-to-one correspondence with demonology, but my position is it's interdimensional. And if it's interdimensional, that opens up quite a wide range of possibilities. But he's also saying we need to pursue that with rigorous scientific research.
How is that different from witchcraft? Like, for example, witchcraft was really prevalent in the Dark Ages and the Inquisition when there were people burning witches, and they said, "Oh, this person was a neighbor. They put a curse on me, and they cursed my field and experienced this." And so witchcraft was very common back then. Everyone was experiencing witchcraft, but as soon as we discovered, witchcraft doesn't exist, it all kind of went away. There's no more witchcraft. That doesn't seem like it's a one-to-one correlation of belief in witchcraft occurs. It seems more like the phenomenon doesn't exist because it would only exist with people who had this prior belief in them. So it seems like if demonology was real, it wouldn't be contingent on the occult. It would be just a thing that existed in the world. And so the fact that it's contingent on occult beliefs seems like it's probably based a mental phenomenon resulting from those beliefs, like witchcraft or any certain kinds of religious experiences. What's the difference there?
Well, for example, what a number of researchers have pointed out is that people who have these close encounters, less than 500 feet, they will wind up with recurring terrifying nightmares. But the animals that are associated with them, the dogs, the cows, the cats, they get killed by the phenomena. And so, I mean, the dog wasn't involved in the occult, and yet the fact that the human was having this experience led to the immediate death of the animals that are associated with him. But the animals in the same area that were not that person's animals, they're untouched. So there's this selection effect. And again, we're dealing with thousands of examples where that has happened. People have been killed by these encounters. So it's not just people having delusions and dreams and visions. There's actual physical harm that's been coming upon people as a result of these encounters. And the closer the encounter, the more likely they are to suffer serious harm. And, as my colleague Kenneth Samples has pointed out, there are cases where people have actually been killed.
I'm guessing these weren't the people giving the stories.
Well, the people who got killed weren't giving the stories, but
Right. So you're
their
saying
relatives that
someone,
saw the death did.
so did they get killed during the encounter, or did they die after the encounter? How does this occur? Like you're saying the
No,
animals
we're
died.
talking about they literally die on the spot. So
So
that's what
someone
impressed. Yeah, go ahead.
so someone sees the encounter and they see someone die in the encounter and they just find the body afterwards. Is that?
Well, I think that's what's impressed some of these researchers is that the human who has the encounter survives, albeit they have after effects, but their animals get killed right on the spot in front of witnesses. And these are healthy animals. And then what they notice is the animals that don't belong to that individual, but belong to a neighbor, they're fine.
Could you describe this for me? So there are a bunch of people. There's the animals, there's the person who has the encounter, and there's these other people. So the person who has the encounter supposedly sees the aliens or the demons, and their animals die. And there's this other person, and they don't see the encounter. All they see is just the animals around them die. Is that what's going on?
That's what's going on, right? They don't have the encounter. The encounter is only, because that's something we document in the book, is that people that have these encounters, that only happens to individuals who are deep into the occult. And the deeper they are, the more likely they are to have these encounters. And so, I've made trips to Alaska where I met all kinds of people who are having these encounters. But Alaska is a place where you got a whole lot more occult involvement than you do, say, in Idaho or Kansas.
Sure, sure. So that would be an interesting phenomenon for sure. I've never heard of any cases where that has occurred. That would be really cool to see. I still don't know if that would count as evidence. It's still just a phenomenon we can't explain yet. So, are there any future testable predictions you can make related to how to indicate this is supernatural as opposed to just an undiscovered physical thing?
Well, I think you're onto something, Tom, in the sense this is something we can't explain with known physics. And this is why we have this journal saying, okay, let's look at non-known physics. And the journal is filled with articles where they say, let's restrict ourselves to physics that could fit within the space-time dimensions of the universe and see if we can make that work. Then you got others saying, well, let's go beyond that and consider possible phenomena where we look at other dimensions of space and time, or dimensions that are not even related to space and time. And so these are the kinds of discussions and dialogues that are going on. And I would hope you would agree with me at a minimum, this is at least worthwhile doing, given that we're looking at 100 million people claiming to have these kinds of experiences. And given that this has been going on for, they can document this back to 3,000 years. So it's not just our own time. It seems to be in every culture. It seems to be ubiquitous to humanity. And it seems to be as a rather large database. So at a minimum, I would agree with Alan Hynek. This is worth investigating. Whatever it is, it's worth investigating because it's impacting a significant fraction of the human population. And if
Oh
we
yeah,
can
I
help
totally
them,
agree.
let's help them. Yeah.
I think everything's worth investigating. I think discovering the truth about the universe is the most important thing we can do. So for sure, it's definitely worth investigating. And I'm aware of the UFO sightings from 1500 BC or whatever. So I do know that those occur. But again, it seems that you have any testable predictions that we can make related to the supernatural that can show that it exists as opposed to just because when I say undiscovered law of nature, I mean the discussions they have about what that could be, there's infinitely many that what they could be both in physics and out of physics. Like we don't know the physics behind dark matter or dark energy or certain kinds of other physical phenomenon or entanglement, quantum mechanics, emergent space-time, consciousness. There's all kinds of things we have no explanation for, but that doesn't mean it's outside of physics. It's just outside of the known physics, which is very, very tiny. We don't know nearly everything. Like I think quote Thomas
Well,
Edison, we only know a
I think
millionth of a
you're
percent of
free to
anything.
speculate that, but does it explain the database? And I think what is impressive is that the physicists who've really devoted their lives to studying this, 100% of them say this falls outside of what's conceivable within the space-time dimensions of the universe. And so that's where we see a consensus. We're dealing with something that is trans or interdimensional. Now that again opens up a wide range of possibilities. But I mean, if it really was something within known physics or physics that could be knowable, I would expect to see some departures from that consensus, but we're not seeing that.
What do you mean? Because when you talk about what is conceivable, that's an argument from incredulity. The fact that we can't conceive of something doesn't tell us anything about what the universe is like. For example, we couldn't conceive of space-time bending before Einstein, and it was inconceivable. That was one of the main arguments made by philosophers against Einstein. Time isn't a physical concept. How could it possibly bend? Therefore, we reject general relativity.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, the boundaries in this discussion have been okay. Let's look at possibilities that take place within the space-time dimensions of the universe, and let's look at possibilities where we invoke other dimensions. And so that's kind of where the dialogue has gone, saying, okay, the fact that we agree that the universe is constrained by certain space-time dimensions puts restraints on the physics, given that we got physical life in the universe. So just the fact that we beings exist in the universe, the fact that we agree that there's these space-time dimensions, that puts constraints on our speculation about unknown physics that falls within that category. And this is where these physicists are saying, boy, everything we know about the UFO phenomena tells us it doesn't fit within that paradigm. It's outside that paradigm.
well, again, when they say that, that's an argument from ignorance. They can't say that. It's not even plausible. You can't say, well, because of here, we know this little bit about how physics works. Therefore, nothing can possibly exist in space-time that could do this. That's not a reasonable conclusion. It's always an argument from ignorance to say it can't possibly, or it transcends, or it's
Well, I gave you an
impossible.
example. I mean, there has been physicists who speculated, like Stuart Kauffman, for example, that there's this fourth law of thermodynamics we haven't discovered yet. Well, other physicists jumped in and said, if that is the case, what are the consequences? Basically, Stuart was speculating that to explain the origin of life. But then other physicists jumped in and said, well, if we take it to the degree that you are trying to take it to explain the origin of life, it rules out the possibility of physical life anywhere in the universe because of the anthropic principle. We know that to have physical life in the universe has to have certain properties. And therefore, there's now a consensus in the scientific community. We better stop trying to pursue a fourth law of thermodynamics. It's a waste of time. We can pursue other things, like maybe there's this modified Newtonian dynamics that is affecting the behavior of galaxies. I mean, that's within the realm of possibility that can be tested. Again, that's kind of what this journal of scientific exploration is all about.
Right,
Basically
right. I
saying,
totally agree. I
yeah,
totally agree that there's certain categories of things, a very specific theory that we can say, if this theory is through, we can predict the consequences. We don't see those consequences, therefore this theory is not true. It's falsifiable
right,
for sure.
right, right.
But that doesn't in any way falsify the class of things, like all things within the category of space-time. Like that isn't really something you could falsify just based off of a few select theories that we can falsify. So the entire class of unknown natural things within space-time can't be falsified because we don't know everything within space-time. We only know
No, I would
chunks of
agree
it.
with that. But again, trying to apply this to the UFO database, that's the challenge.
What do you mean that's a challenge? Because from my understanding, like problem of underdetermination, any combination of phenomenon can be explained by infinitely many hypotheses. The hard part is trying to tie those into a specific theory, which can then make predictions and be shown to exist. And I don't see how the supernatural can do that any better than any of the made-up physics ones.
Well, again, you got people like Alan Hynek and Jacques Vallée saying, okay, we're looking at phenomena that obey the laws of physics and are constrained by the space time dimensions. We don't see any possible way to explain the UFO database. Therefore, we're saying we're dealing with something interdimensional. I mean, Jacques Vallée has written very lengthy books on this. With your suggestion, for example, if I knew physicists that gave that a serious look, that drew a different conclusion. But that's not what I'm seeing.
Oh, for sure, but I don't see how his argument is any different from saying the philosophers who said time can't bend, therefore it must be supernatural. Essentially, the fact that we can't imagine something being the case, given our current limited understanding, isn't in any way evidence that it is something else. So
Well,
it doesn't.
again, Jacques is not using supernatural language. He
Oh, right.
just,
I'm
yeah, I
sorry.
mean,
Let's
he's not
clarify.
trying to argue for the supernatural. He's saying it's something going on in dimensions that don't fit within our physical universe. That's what he's saying. And, if you read cosmology, you got astrophysicists making the same kinds of speculations when they deal with the multiverse. So that's what he's saying. Is it something outside of all that? And so this is where you're seeing the consensus.
Right, right. That's where I agree. I agree that there are things outside of the known physics, which are probably just more physics. And I'm asking, is there any reason to believe that that something more is supernatural as opposed to unknown natural? Because just saying there is something more than the known physics doesn't indicate supernatural something more as opposed to just an unknown natural something
That
more,
all
like the
depends on
multiverse.
your definition of natural and supernatural. And that's what Jacques has basically made the point is it's something outside of the space-time dimensions of the universe and the laws of physics. And what he means by the laws of physics are the laws of physics that for which there is no doubt that they exist. Things like gravity, thermodynamics, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear force. And also he's making the point, if you're going to speculate a fifth force of physics, it's got to be able to be powerful enough to explain this phenomena without being discovered by other scientific means.
Well,
I
it could
mean,
also
one
just
thing to,
be, it could be an emergent interaction between those other forces, which you just don't know about yet. So it doesn't have to be outside of those, the current laws of physics entirely. It could just be a new emergent phenomenon of those phenomena that we just don't know about yet.
yeah, again, at the 30th place of the decimal. But this is where Jacques is making the point. We're dealing with something that's a lot closer to us than the 30th place of the decimal. So this is basically we're saying this is where we put it outside of well, maybe there's something going on that adjusts the theory of general relativity 40 places of the decimal out. And that's why we can't see it, because we don't have the measuring capacity to see it. But Jacques' point is, we're looking at the UFO database. We're not looking at the 10th, 20th, or 30th place of the decimal. And therefore, this is why he says it's got to be something operating in dimensions outside of the dimensions of the universe.
Yeah, it's an interesting hypothesis. I just don't think it follows from any of the evidence. Like, I'm pretty sure that there's infinitely many ways to explain that take nothing more than just there was some kind of an explosion and the wind blew away all of the evidence that was there.
Well,
So,
Jacques actually deals with that and just says, that's not going to fly. And again, I would encourage you actually look at these journals, look at I mean, the fact that we have these physicists, all who've put more than 10 years of study into this thing. I'm the only one of these physicists that's a Christian. The others are all agnostics and atheists, and yet they're not disagreeing with me. And so I don't think you can attribute it just to the fact that, I've got a worldview that's different than theirs. Uh, and so, and they're actually dealing with the evidence. And you say, prediction. That's one thing we tried to do in this book, saying, here's what we found is, for example, Americans tend to be really naive about the occult. And so we helped them out in saying, these are things that if you do from a Christian worldview perspective, you're inviting these interdimensional beings to impact your life. Take away the invitations, they can't touch you. Give them the invitations, they're going to come. And so that's where I would say this is a testable hypothesis. If you don't believe it, put it to the test and see what happens. Although I would caution you to avoid those things that are going to have deleterious impacts on your life.
I don't think that's a novel prediction. That's the same prediction made in psychology for the past 500 years. If you play with Ouija boards, it'll seem like there's something giving you a word and it'll actually spell out a word. And really, we know it's just the psychology of the people playing with the Ouija board. There's no special dimensional spirit there. Same with stones. If you play with magic stones, you'll see these effects. Like if it's a stone that'll help you be more energetic, you'll be more energetic just because of the placebo effect. I mean, all of those things are predictions that have already been made in psychological fields many times over and have already been confirmed and made testable predictions and have all kinds of results that we already know show that those predictions have been true. So it doesn't seem to be a novel prediction that you're making. It's just like the sun will rise tomorrow. Like we already know that. So why do you think that counts as a novel prediction that would actually indicate this being true when it's the same prediction that's been made in psychology for the past 500 years?
Well, the very fact that it works. If you leave the occult, you'll stop having these experiences. And we're not talking trivial experiences. I mean, yeah, I do agree that people playing with magic stones, you really don't see anything happening. People aren't being killed. They're not being injured. Their animals aren't being killed on the spot. They're not having these terrifying recurring nightmares. They're not getting communications where they begin to go in a trance and begin to do automatic writing that adds up to thousands of pages. That kind of stuff is not going on.
Well,
And so
actually,
I
I've heard
think,
of
again,
about two-thirds of those examples are things I've exactly heard of from occult or Ouija boards and talking with the dead and magic stones and different kinds of things are exactly the same that I've heard of. I don't know about the dying animals. I've never heard that happen before, but most of the other examples you listed are things I hear exactly from those kinds of people.
well, again, what these researchers are saying, there is a one-to-one correspondence between the UFO phenomena, the residual UFO phenomena, and the occult and demonology. And so when you raise examples from the occult and demonology, that's consistent. I think where you have a challenge with the UFO database, number one, it's huge. We're not talking a few dozen isolated cases. We're talking tens of millions of reported incidences. And, we literally have thousands of places where you got a crash site that you can go and investigate. And again, you got people you can interview where we have documented cases where there's been actual injuries, animals dying, people dying. And so, uh, and that's kind of what people like Jacques Vallée are saying is we just can't sweep this under the rug. Real things are happening and they're hurting people. I think that's his motivation. He says, look, I'm not a believer in God, but people are being hurt and I want to help them.
We have to go to the Q&A pretty soon here. if you guys are ready for it, if there are any last points that you were just extremely excited to get in, we can do that. Otherwise, we've got about 15, maybe 20 minutes tops to do these questions that we have.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just mentioned that I totally agree. I think it is. There are definitely real phenomenon that cause people to die all over the world and suffer, and we know lots of those, and they're not all attributed to the occult. There's lots of the other things I mentioned also lead to death and pain and suffering all over the world. Voodoo does. That's why they think that you can curse someone and kill them, because it does lead to deaths and suffering and pain for all kinds of things. I don't, and definitely I think it's worth investigating. I think everything is worth investigating for sure. But all of the things that you listed seem to be the same kinds of things, other than like the animals dropping dead on the spot. I haven't heard of anything that makes that kind of claim. All the claims you've listed seem to be the same as any of the other claims that are made by voodoo or Ouija boards or astrology or any of the other kinds of science, the ideologies that try to make these kinds of claims. I don't see anything different about the claim that you're making than the claim that they're making. It's just the generic kind of stuff that psychology has already predicted for like the past 500 years. And so if you could actually make novel tested predictions, or like the scientist said, present an artifact of some kind that could demonstrate this, that would be great evidence. I would be happy to accept it. I have nothing against the supernatural or aliens, but I just don't see any reason to believe it's true when it's most of the stuff that we can see is just explained by psychological phenomena.
That's exactly my point, Tom. There is a one-to-one correspondence. That's what these researchers are saying. And moreover, our model would not predict that there would be artifacts. If you're talking about something that's interdimensional and outside the laws of physics, there won't be artifacts. I mean, that's what got these researchers interested. If there was artifacts, then we know it's part of the physics of the universe, but that's not what we're seeing.
We, at some point, can jump. You guys ready for the Q&A? We do have a lot,
Sure.
so we just had another
Sure.
one fire in.
Sure.
Really excited to get to these. This has been a really interesting conversation, folks, so we hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have, because I've really enjoyed it, and we will jump into it with Sentinel Apologetics, who says, Dr. Hugh Ross is my hero, and then in parentheses, Allahi as Salam? I'm not sure if that's Hebrew, but you have a fan, Dr. Ross, so very nice. And Steven Steen, thanks for your super chat, along with, let's see, she calls herself Stupid Whore Energy. She says any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I think this is a challenge to Dr. Ross. Anything that you'd like to say to that phrase, Dr. Ross?
Well, we're going to talk about, beings that are more intelligent than us, but again, constrained by the physics that we are constrained by. They still have to obey the laws of physics. I think that's where Tom and I agree, is that this idea that physical aliens like us have come to Earth, that's simply not possible, because if you go through interstellar space, your spaceship will be destroyed by the particles and the debris there. I mean, we already know, for example, the biggest spaceship that you can send to the nearest star cannot be bigger than 10 centimeters across, because if it is, it's going to get destroyed. Or likewise, I think we now know that sending humans to Mars is not part of the possibility, because to make that happen, you got to put those beings inside a gigantic, stable magnetic bottle. And there's now a growing consensus amongst physicists. We might be able to make a small magnetic bottle, but not one big enough to be able to protect astronauts on a trip from Earth to Mars and back. And so we'll have to send machines. We're not going to be able to send people. That just got recently published, that if you expose humans to the radiation you're going to encounter between here and Mars, where you don't have a magnetic bottle to protect you from that radiation, your digestive tract will be destroyed in 3 months.
Really
I
interesting.
would disagree slightly though, because I think that there are definitely things in physics like the Einstein-Rosen bridge. Maybe new technologies can make small Einstein-Rosen bridge, and you can actually travel across the universe just by bending space-time in some way that we just don't know yet. So I always hesitate to say things are impossible. It's only impossible as far as we know, but we can never say it's truly impossible because we just don't have all the knowledge.
Well, that's why I devoted a chapter in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. If you're talking about sending a physical craft of a certain size between here and the nearest stars, you're going to have to move at a significant velocity in order to get them there within a few thousand years. Even if you got beings that can live 10,000 years, you still got a problem because if you try to go very fast, your spaceship will be destroyed if it's made of any kind of material matter.
Well, that's
And
why I
it's,
meant, just to
yeah,
clarify, that's why I mentioned an Einstein-Rosen bridge, because it just takes the 2 points of space and moves them together. And so your ship doesn't actually move fast at all. It's just normal speed. But because you put a hole in space-time, you can just travel from two very distant places very quickly without any additional physics.
well, I have physicist friends, for example, who say that, you know, if you can bend the space time through making adjustments in your ship, you can actually go close to the speed of light. The problem is you got to convert the mass of Jupiter into pure energy every second to make that happen. And so now you got a problem. How are you going to be able to come up with an energy source equivalent to converting 100% of Jupiter into energy every second?
Black
I
holes.
mean, it's not impossible, but it does stretch credulity to speculate something of that nature.
We maybe we'll go to the next question, as we do have others that are related in a way. This one's not. This is more on Converse Contender. Thanks for your super chat. They said, I would pay money to see Dr. Ross and Dr. Heiser on this topic. Well, who knows? Maybe someday. Appreciate that. iPhone Musings, thanks for your support in that super chat. And thanks for yours, Michael Dresden. A challenge for you, Tom, an old nemesis of yours from the super chat. Says, theist gives evidence violating laws of physics, suggesting supernatural. Tom replies with, quote, that's just the laws of physics we know of. I think there is
Yeah,
there.
it's pretty obvious. Like, you can't ever present evidence of anything violating the laws of physics because we don't know all the laws of physics. You can only present evidence of something violating the known laws of physics. Everything in human knowledge is tentative and provisional. This is the stuff we currently know about. So saying that there is something that an interaction that we can't produce by combining our known laws of physics doesn't mean there's something supernatural there. That's just a basic argument from ignorance. It's not this, therefore X. That's how the structure of an argument from ignorance. So all you're saying when you're saying it's outside of the laws of physics is really it's outside of the known laws of physics, not outside of all of physics.
Gotcha. And thanks for your question. This one comes in from Matt Powell's Pet Pterodactyl. Thanks for your support. And Leo Filius, who asked, Dr. Ross, can you explain how a non physical thing causes physical effects? And how do we determine that it was indeed a non physical cause for that said effect? What is the mechanism?
Hey, the reason why I'm saying is that it's a non-physical effect, something outside of the dimensions of the universe, is because it's producing physical impacts that are significant. We're not talking something that's trivial. The fact that you see a large crater where the ground is depressed by a foot or more, where all the snow is melted, the vegetation is damaged, and it's damaged in a way that can't be explained by known radiation phenomena. This tells me that something significant is happening. The fact that there's no sonic boom or heat friction. And so, and again, I'm not alone in saying this. Everybody who had a PhD level in physics who studied this has drawn the same conclusion. We're dealing with something that has significant power that's operating outside of the laws of physics and the space-time dimensions.
Gotcha. And thanks for your question. This one comes in from, let's see, Sentinel Apologetics. Appreciate it. Said, Hugh, please elaborate on the key fact of fine tuning that since there is no possibility for extraterrestrial life, then residual UFO phenomena must be supernatural.
Yeah, in the sense that if we're talking about physical beings like us on another planetary system, building a spacecraft and traveling here, I mean, people have speculated that such aliens, for example, helped the Egyptians build the pyramids, then you have to explain within known physics how they got here. And if you're going to appeal to unknown physics, you have to explain why we've not been able to observe their effects in the universe. I mean, this is what's constraining speculation amongst astronomers and physicists about these unknown physics. Yes, I agree with Tom. There could be laws of physics and constants of physics we've not yet discovered, but they have to be at a sufficiently low level to avoid discovery at this point, which is why I made the comment, yeah, if we're willing to make measurements to 30 places the decimal, maybe we'll find some subtle addition to what we know about physics, but it will be subtle. It's not going to be dramatic enough to explain how physical beings like us could travel across interstellar space. Moreover, what I can tell you as an astronomer, everywhere we look in the universe, outside of our planetary system, we see physical conditions that are hostile for the existence of any life form beyond a microbe. I mean, we've been looking. I mean, when you watch those Star Wars movies, they all begin with a galaxy far, far away. As an astronomer, I got a problem with those movies because we've looked at stars far, far away, and none of them have the characteristics that must be fine-tuned to make possible advanced life in those galaxies. Ours is the only galaxy we can see that has those characteristics. Our galaxy group has characteristics that we see in no other galaxy group, characteristics that are crucial to make possible the existence of advanced life. And I argue reasons to believe we can extend that argument out to super galaxy clusters. We can extend it all the way down to fundamental particles. In each case, we see these fine-tuned characteristics that constrain what we can speculate about existence of life elsewhere. Now, incidentally, I'm not saying we're not going to find the remains of life outside of planet Earth. I've been on record since the 1980s. We're going to find the remains of life on every solar system body except for the sun, for the simple reason Earth has been so prolific with life for so long that when meteoroids strike the Earth, they export Earth's soil and deposit that soil on all the solar system bodies. And so I've been promoting literally for the past 20 years. We need to go back to the moon because on the surface of the moon, we've got 20,000 kilograms of Earth soil for every 100 square kilometers. And 1 ton of Earth soil will have 100 quadrillion microbes in it. We can go to the moon and we will find the fossils of Earth's first life. On Earth, we'll never find them. Earth's geology has destroyed them, but they should be there in pristine form on the moon. And I'm arguing that could be a huge breakthrough to giving us insights on the origin of life.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. And Stupid Whore Energy, as she calls herself, strikes again. Her question is, what about all of the habitable exoplanets that we've been cataloging?
Yes, I've written on that, and you'll see a lot of it in the published literature. When they talk about habitable planets, they're talking about planets that orbit their host stars in the liquid water habitable zone. That's the broadest of the habitable zones, broadest of the planetary habitable zones. I mean, any orbit where you got the possibility of water existing between 0 and 100 degrees centigrade would be in the liquid water habitable zone. But that's not the only habitable zone you got to deal with. For a planet to be habitable, it must simultaneously exist in the ultraviolet habitable zone. Too little ultraviolet radiation, certain biochemical reactions crucial for life won't run. Too much ultraviolet radiation, you kill the life. And that zone is much narrower than the liquid water habitable zone. And papers been published showing that it's extremely rare to have the liquid water habitable zone simultaneously overlap the ultraviolet habitable zone. And in addition to those two habitable zones, there are 11 more we know of. And above the 4,300 planets that have been discovered outside of the solar system, we can't even find one that exists in even 2 of those habitable zones, let alone all 13. Of all the planets we know of, including those in our solar system, only one exists in all 13 habitable zones. You get 3 guesses which planet that is.
Gotcha.
Jupiter.
Thank you. And thanks for your question from. This one comes from James W., who's been on to debate this topic. He says, Tom, you seem okay with the known laws of physics being violated. Let me see if I got that right. You seem okay with the known laws of physics being violated, wouldn't alien technology be a rational explanation, and that would make interplanetary travel possible?
Well, the known laws of physics are violated all the time. Dark matter and dark energy violate the known laws of physics. So known laws of physics are just the stuff we currently know about. To violate them just means there's something we don't know about yet. Could undiscovered technology do it? Absolutely. We have no idea what the limits of technology are. Like Hugh said, it's going to take a lot of energy to do that. And if we ever found a way to create miniature black holes, we could potentially do it that way. So, or we could create a Dyson sphere and create energy that way. There's lots of different ways we could potentially produce the energy to do this with the known laws of physics, but there could always be more unknown ways to do it too that we just haven't discovered yet. So there's lots of different explanations for it.
You bet. And thanks for your question. This one comes in from Sigifredo Sarabia. Says, Dr. Ross, is Christianity or the Christian perspective, or sorry about that, in the Christian perspective, is it not arguable humans were created to be the only intelligent life, or to have the, I think they mean, or life's purpose? I don't know what they mean by that. If not, how do you deviate from the Bible to say that it's not true there's another, quote, perfection, unquote, in aliens? I think that
Yeah, I get the question. And this has been debated by Christian Bible scholars literally for several thousand years. And it goes back into the days before Christ. And what you really see in this debate is that from a biblical perspective, you can go either way. One Christian perspective is that God enjoys creating to such a high degree, he's not going to stop on one planet. He's going to have created life on other planets. However, given the evidence that what we see here on planet Earth requires supernatural intervention, likewise, we'd expect it there as well. So the Christians, for example, that are anticipating we're going to find life, including advanced life, on many other extrasolar planets. But then there's another group of Christian theologians who are saying, when you read the Bible, it seems like God does not waste miraculous interventions without something that fits within his purposes. And given that the purpose for God creating the universe is to permanently eradicate evil and suffering, while he enhances our human free will capability to express and experience love, he only needs one planet and he only needs one species of physical intelligent beings. And so they would argue that we're alone. But as you look at the Christian debate, it's about split 50-50. And so as a Christian, you got the freedom to believe one or the other. Although I've personally argued that if you look at Hebrews chapter 9 and 10, it seems to imply that this is the only place in the universe where God has created intelligent physical beings that are in need of being redeemed from their propensity to commit sin and evil. That doesn't rule out dolphins on another planet, but it does seem to rule out the possibility there are beings like us that are in need of being redeemed from their evil. But could there be beings who have never committed evil? That's certainly within the realm of possibility. So this is an open debate. And many years ago, I wrote an article on this subject with two other astronomers. All three of us were Christians, but all three of us held different views on this, basically making the point from a Christian worldview perspective, you've got options on where you want to land on this. As an astronomer, I can tell you, when we make the observations, all we're seeing are conditions outside of our solar system that are hostile for the existence of advanced life. We're not seeing the possibility, based on observations we've made so far, that there could be these sites in which there's advanced life like us.
You bet. And Spart344, thanks for your question, said in regards to the correlation of UFO experiences and the occult, how is that different from people seeing their religious iconography or figures during a near-death experience?
Well, I don't know whether you want to take that one, Tom. That's kind of a whole other subject, near-death experiences. But I kind of put it in the same category as the UFOs, is that most people who claim a near-death experience, it's really not a near-death experience. But if you were to bring, say, Dr. Neil Sabovo on this show as a medical doctor, he'd be able to make a case similar to mine about UFOs, that there's a residual there where we got actual hard scientific evidence that indeed experience is something going on at the psychological level, or it could be attributed to oxygen deprivation in the brain.
I think he's asking like the kids who have near death experiences see Santa Claus, Hindus who have near death experiences see Brahma, Christians who have near death experiences see Jesus, Muslims who have near death experiences see
Yep, we get it.
Muhammad. So the point is that the people who have near death experiences all experience with a 1-to-1 correlation their preferred belief system. So how is the occult experiences not the same? The fact there's a 1-to-1 correlation between personal experiences with aliens in like close proximity being correlated to the occult seems to be the same kind of phenomenon, where it's because they already have this pre-existing belief in their mind, their experience is then interpreted by their mind to be caused by aliens, just like near-death experience is interpreted by the mind to be caused by your preferred deity.
Well, again, I could talk about, we interviewed this Dr. Saboto, and he said, as a medical doctor and a surgeon, he was very skeptical. But what he did is he would put written messages on the girders above the operating table. And so when people recovered from surgery and claimed they had a near-death experience and said, well, did you see anything written on the girder? And they said, yes. Tell me what it is.
Oh, I
And
apologize for interrupting, but I think the questioner was asking, what is the difference between the fact that people have near-death experiences and only see their preferred deity, and the fact that the correlation between the occult and aliens is the same kind of a thing, where it seems to be a psychological phenomenon?
I get it. Sure. Well, keep in mind from a Christian worldview perspective, you've got these angels in rebellion against God who are trying to move people away from the Christian faith. And if anything that's not Christian, they're happy with. And that's something we see, is that in the occult, they're basically trying to get you to live your life and die before you adopt the Christian faith. And they'll use whatever tools they have at their hand. So I'm not surprised there's a diversity. But again, what we've been discussing, Tom, is that when we look at the UFO database, we're looking at phenomena that's beyond just delusions and wishful thinking. People are actually being hurt by these phenomena. Their animals are being hurt. We got these crater sites. I think that's quite different from what people experience in these visions from near-death experiences. It's a vision. It's a whole lot different than a real crater where you've got physical evidence that something happened there, where you got animals who have got nothing to do with the occult other than the fact that they have an emotional relationship with the owner that does, and that people that don't. So, I mean, these are the reasons why physicists are saying this is something that we can't just put underneath the rug. We have to investigate it and find out what's going on.
Thanks. I think James W. from the chat had something to add to that, just saying the occult isn't the same as aliens, though. I think that James W. is arguing that though Jesus is like an example of something from the Christian religion, it's not clear that, let's say, aliens or the occult are an example from the other camp necessarily, in the way that it's obvious that Christ is from Christianity. We do have a new question that came in. Thanks for your question. Let's see, we got that from James. Thanks, James, for that. Appreciate your super chat input there, and thanks for your Patreon input. The next question, oh gosh, sorry, I closed the window, but I do have it here. Thanks for your question from Sohan D'Souza. Glad to see you again. Says, if our omnivalent being only needs one...
Omnivalent, the evil, omni-evil? Is that what he's saying?
I've never seen this omni before. It's the omni, so O-M-N-I, and then V as in Victor, A as in Andy, L as in Leo, so omnivalent being.
So like malevolent, but omni-malevolent? Is that
Oh, yes,
right?
yes, that makes sense. Okay.
So what's the question?
So maybe it means all good if the
I think it means all evil. Malevolent is evil.
Gotcha. Let's see. They say if this being only needs one planet and one species, why the vastly outsized quantities of extrasolar debris? I think they must mean omnipotent. They say if this omnipotent being only needs one planet and one species, why the vastly outsized quantities of extrasolar debris and extinct species to get there? So like they're saying like extrasolar debris, like things that you don't need, kind of like waste, I think is that they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways you could look at that question. Why a universe of 50 billion trillion stars if God only needs one planetary system? Another way to look at that is why 3.8 billion years of a half billion species of life that predate us if God's goal is to bring us human beings upon the scene? Those are two distinct questions. I could answer either one or both. What do
Gotcha.
you want me to do?
Both sounds good to me.
Both
Sure.
sounds good? Okay. Well, in terms of why you need the half billion species, uh, from my biblical worldview perspective, it's God's intent that there would be billions of human beings living on planet Earth with the wealth and technology to be able to take the good news of salvation through Jesus Christ to all the people groups of the world quickly rather than slowly. And that requires quadrillions of tons of biodeposits in the crust of the earth. And so, for that to be possible, you need billions of years of previous existing life efficiently laying down coal, oil, natural gas, limestone, marble, gypsum, etc. Without that, we couldn't have our global high tech civilization. As for the universe, the total mass of the universe must be crucially fine tuned to get the elements we need for life. Make the universe even the tiniest bit less massive, then when you have the universe expanding from the cosmic creation event, you get only a small percentage of the primordial hydrogen converted into helium through nuclear fusion in the first 3.5 minutes of the existence of the universe, which means future stars will not be able to make any element heavier than helium. There'll be no carbon, no oxygen, no nitrogen. On the other hand, make the universe the tiniest bit more massive, then the future stars quickly convert all of that primordial hydrogen to helium into nothing but elements heavier than iron. In both cases, you get no carbon, no oxygen, no nitrogen. I can make a similar argument that the mass of the universe must be fine tuned to get the galaxies, stars, and planets you need to make physical life possible. If the universe is not massive enough, then galaxies will never form. And if you make it too massive, then the only objects that form are black holes and neutron stars. And so, if you want stars and planets like we see here, the universe's mass. So, for two different reasons, the universe total mass must be exquisitely fine tuned. Likewise, the age of the universe must be exquisitely fine tuned. I've written a book saying there are 140 other features of the universe that must be exquisitely fine tuned, assuming that God had other purposes for the laws of physics that he chose. And again, in my book, Why the Universe is the Way It Is, I detail all those different purposes for why the universe must be the way that it is.
Thank you. And Sohan D'Souza, thanks for your response via Super Chat, said, but God can just create oil deposits. I think that's in response to what you had said, Dr. Ross.
Well, God could, but then why do we see the carbon 12 to carbon 13 isotope ratio that indicates that it came from past living creatures? We see the same thing with the limestone and the marble. Incidentally, that's an argument I get from young earth creationists. They say God could have just snapped his fingers and done it, but he wouldn't erase the evidence of what he's done. That's something we see in the Bible, that God does not deceive, he does not lie. He's not going to erase the physical evidence of what he has done. And the physical evidence tells us there indeed has been billions of years of life that predated us.
Gotcha. And thanks for your question. This one comes in from Slam RN. Glad to see you again. Slam says, Hi, this is Susan L. from Valparaiso. Can you talk about the super enrichment the Earth and Sun have of heavy metals, especially uranium and thorium?
Well, that's what's interesting is that we live on this planet that seems to be the uranium thorium champion of the universe. I mean, if you compare the quantities of uranium and thorium we see on planet Earth to what we would expect based on our measurements of the elemental abundances of our galaxy and of our star and of the universe, rocky planets like ours, we have 630 times as much thorium and 340 times as much uranium. We got 60 times as much titanium. In fact, I've written a book making the point. Every element in the periodic table, we see these extreme anomalies with respect to planet Earth and other rocky planets within the universe. But in each case, that extreme anomaly is exactly what you need for advanced light to be possible. If we didn't have that extreme superabundance of uranium and thorium, then we wouldn't have a powerful magnetic field to shield us from cosmic and solar radiation. We wouldn't have long lasting plate tectonic activity to transform our planet from a water world into a world where you got both surface oceans and surface continents. I could go on, but I think that's enough.
Gotcha, and thanks for your question. This comes in from Pants L. Jones. Thanks for your question. Said, for Hugh Ross. They said Jason Lyle said decay rates had been sped up by millions of times in a lab, and you had disagreed. Which is true?
Okay, I had a debate with Jason Lyle a few weeks ago. He's a young Earth creationist, and we were basically debating the point: have the laws of physics changed by factors of millions and trillions of times at the fall of Adam or Noah's flood or both? And I was making the point: number one, the Bible repeatedly tells us the laws of physics do not change and will not change until evil has been conquered and eradicated. And number two, we astronomers can actually measure the laws of physics and constants of physics in distant stars and galaxies. And we're looking at distant stars and galaxies. We're looking back in time because it took light time to reach our telescopes. And what we see is at least out to 12 billion light years, the laws of physics are identical to what they are here on Earth. And if the laws of physics are not changing, then all young Earth creationist models that have been proposed so far fail. Every one of them requires dramatically altered laws of physics at the fall of Adam or the flood or both to sustain their interpretation of the Bible. But most of our debate was over whether or not the Bible actually teaches that the creation days are long periods of time, like I believe, or just 24-hour periods, like Jason believes. And I was basically making the point: if you go through all the creation texts in the Bible, read them literally and consistently, it rules out the possibility that these creation days are only 6 consecutive 24-hour periods.
Gotcha, and thanks for your question. This is let's see, you've got a fan out there, TJump. They said, support for my homie Tom all day, every day. Let's start a podcast, Mr. Rogan. Is that your new nickname, Tom, Mr. Rogan?
I don't think so. I'll take it though.
That's quite flattering. And thank you for your question. This one comes in from Sigifredo Sarabia. Appreciate it. I'm a little bit confused. I've never heard, but this is outside of my specialty, the idea of speed of space. Sigifredo Sarabia said, Dr. Ross, hypothetically, is it possible to travel faster than the speed of space if aliens are not in the observable universe? How do we make contacts past that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what he's getting at, but we're talking about beings that are not constrained by the physics of the universe
I think
or
I know
the
what he's saying.
universe's space-time dimensions. Pardon me, Tom?
I think I know what he's saying. When he says the speed of space, the expansion rate of the universe, space can
Yeah.
travel faster than the speed of light. I think that's what he means.
Yeah, okay. No, that's true. that the expansion of the space surface of the universe is not limited by the velocity of light, because it's not anything physical that's traveling faster than the velocity of light. It's just the space-time dimensionality, and that carries objects with it. So for example, we go into the future, there will be galaxies moving away from us at greater than the velocity of light. Now, it doesn't violate Einstein's principle that a physical object cannot be accelerated beyond the velocity of light. So if you're moving from one spot in that space surface to another spot, you are limited by the velocity of light. But the space surface itself can expand faster than the velocity of light. It's physical objects that cannot be accelerated past the velocity of light. And yeah, right now the universe is old enough that it's expanding at the farthest distances that we can see along the space surface of the universe at barely under the velocity of light, which means a time will come in the future, not too distant future, astronomically speaking, when we'll no longer be able to see the light from the cosmic creation event. We can see it now. We couldn't see it in the past. We won't see it in the future, but we can see it right now.
And I think his question was can the supernatural entities travel faster than that rate?
Yeah, I would agree they can, because they're not subject to Einstein's theories of relativity. If they're not part of the physics of the universe, there's no reason why they would be constrained by the laws of physics. So yeah, they could go technically faster than the velocity of light because they're not physical entities.
Thanks so much. And Slam RN for another question says, where, and this is, by the way, folks, we may not get to any other questions. Slam RN said, where was our early solar system first formed?
I think that question's directed at me, and that would be, we see in the elemental abundances of the sun and of our solar system that it could not have formed at its current location or galaxy. There are many papers published indicating we had to form inside a rather large and dense open cluster of stars, probably almost halfway closer to the center of the galaxy than we are right now, and got ejected from that cluster and sent out to the location where we are now, meaning that we were born in that part of the galaxy that was maximal in its abundance of heavy elements and wound up in a location that is one of the minima in terms of heavy element abundance. But there's one reason why advanced life is possible here on planet Earth, is because of that extraordinary journey that our solar system took when it was very young.
Gotcha. Want to say thank you so much. That is the remainder of our questions. Want to say we really appreciate you folks for your questions and for hanging out with us today. And especially want to say thank you so much to Dr. Hugh Ross and TJump. It's been a pleasure to have you guys on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And thanks, mods, for keeping an eye on the chat as well. We are excited, as mentioned. We'll be back. We'll actually be back tonight. TJump is coming back for a tag team debate. So that should be an interesting one. I don't know how Converse Contender got you and Godless Girl to team up, so that should be an exciting one. But want to remind you folks, both TJump and Dr. Hugh Ross are linked in our description. So, having listened to today's epic discussion, this is a really fun one, folks. Want to let you know you can hear plenty more and read plenty more from our guests at their links that are conveniently in the description waiting for you. So, thanks so much, folks, and we will see you next time. We hope you have a great rest of your day or night.